It's a pretty exciting day for me today, because today I get to start working with the timber I picked up from Duffiled back before Christmas. I'll put a link to that vid below. In particular, I get to start working with a piece of cherry. Now, if you come from a land where cherry's bountiful and easy to get hold of, then you're probably going to go, yeah, whatever, big deal. But for me, it's a huge deal. This will be the first time I've ever worked with cherry, and I can't wait. I'm a little bit excited, but being English, it probably looks like nothing more than a bit of wind. Now, I've been running a little website for about 5-6 years that predominantly sells chopping boards and predominantly end grain chopping boards, and the most popular and indeed the most profitable board that I make and sell is a large end grain single species chopping board, relatively random pattern. You'll see that later. 450 long, 400 wide, 50 thick, and I'm really interested to see how cherry will compete with other species. Without a shadow of a doubt, at the moment, the most popular is oak, followed by walnut, then maple, and I want to see where cherry's going to rank to. This piece of cherry is the offcut from the plank that I bought from Duffiled, as mentioned earlier, because it was too big to go in the van. 3.1 metres, just over. So this is the bit I had to have lopped off at the timber yard so I could get it in the back. But while I was there, I had the presence of mind to make sure it would be long enough to do what I want to do today. And this piece is 640mm long, which means it's plenty long enough for what I need, given the thickness. If you want to know about sizing calculations for rough stock to finished product, then I'll put a link to a video I made specifically about that down below in the description. It's going to be an end grain board, so what I'm doing now has got absolutely nothing to do with trying to stabilise movement. This is just trying to make a pattern of something that'll look nice. So I like to oppose it, so up, down, up, to give it that sort of random look that I mentioned earlier. Down, up, down, up, down. And then when we get it into the end grain, if you can imagine all of this, it's going to be pretty all over the place, which I think is cool. I'm in a very fortunate position to have a planer that's wide enough to just take the board and flatten one side, which also means I could run it through the thicknesser. But as I've mentioned many times, I'm far too lazy to lift the tables up, so I'm gonna flatten the top side just by running it through the drum sander. It's much easier. And I've not had my second coffee yet, so give me a break. So required height of board, 50mm. plus allowance for flattening 2mm, plus kerf size 3mm, 2.8mm. That gives me a cut of 55, and length of material divided by amount of material I'll lose to get each piece, 600, 55, 10, 11 pieces. 11 pieces at 45, 495 quid's in. Sweet deal. I want 450. So the other thing I like to do is just to oppose the grain on the pears. Don't know if anyone ever notices, but it makes me feel better. Looking for a squeeze out on every joint, and I've got it. Objective achieved. Now I've popped the board out the clamps and I'm ready to flatten it, final flattening. I just wanted to talk about this misconception that seems to be running around that you can't plane an end grain board, and you totally can. There's loads of different ways to do it. My preferred approach is to take a little round over bit, 3mm round over bit, put a little round over on the back edge, and then run it across the surface planer and just take very fine passes off, and it's absolutely fine. Works a treat. To flatten and parallel the other face, for me, it's more often than not got to be the drum sander. It avoids having to spend an extra 73 seconds converting the planer into a thicknesser, which drives me mad. So I'd much rather spend an extra 20 minutes stood in front of the drum sander, putting it through time and time again until it's nice and flat. So to square and smooth the edges, it's got to be this incredible belt sander that I've got, the HS950 from Hammer. Awesome piece of kit if you can possibly run to squeezing one in your workshop, and of course affording one, then do it. It's amazing. There's no setup, no risk of tear out, and the edges are all but finished. A little bit of sanding. Talking about sanding, that's the next step. My approach is the Festool Rotex 150 on fixed mode with a bit of 80 grit on it. Now the sandpaper I'm using at the moment is the Cubitron paper. It is fantastic. It outlasts the Festool paper by 2 or 3 times easy and cuts like a blimmin' lightning. And sanding is one of my most unrelished jobs. So the board gets 80 grit all over, followed by 120 grit all over. So onto the handles. My favourite approach for cutting the handles at the moment is with the spindle moulder. I think the handle shape that it leaves is by far the prettiest. There's no burn marks. It leaves a lovely clean finish that needs minimal sanding, and I really, really like it. The downside is the setup time. Yeah, I know, mank, moan, yet again, but there's loads of setup. I really, really want a standalone spindle moulder, but I just can't squeeze one in yet. So to make it worthwhile, it's got to be in batches. Apologies for the lack of sound. My idiot assistant forgot to turn the mic on. Oh, that's me. Anyway, so now that the handles are cut, I can round over the corners and the edges. For the corners, I've got this El Cheapo JCB router I bought from B&Q. Under 100 quid for the router. It's a 2100 watt router, I think, 1/2 inch collar. Works an absolute treat. It's proof that you really don't need any fancy features or facilities on a router, especially if you're just using it for a single job like this. The only mod I've made to it is to put an extended acrylic base on it. I've got a 6mm round over bit in it, and it does the job absolutely superbly. It's been doing it for years, and I fully expect it to continue doing a superb job for years to come. At this stage in the process, really important to start being mindful of the finished surface, because we're not far off now, and the last thing we want to do is have to go back to the drum sander. So I've got one of these little suede leather patches that I bought from either Workshop Heaven or Woodworkers Workshop. I'll see if I can dig up a link and stick it in the description below. Absolutely brilliant. Just that bit of protection to make sure you don't get a dent in the top or the bottom, which, like I say, would be dreadful now. So to take off that sharp edge, I've got a little 3.2mm round over bit in my Bosch battery router. Awesome router. A bit weird to get used to, but once you do, absolutely superb. Love it. And it may well be the very thing I need to tip me over the edge and buy more battery powered routers. I know, I hear what you're saying. You've got plenty of routers, Graham. Can you ever have enough routers? Or is it clamps? Or both? And now for some sanding. And I bet you're expecting me to say I'm going to sand until I'm blue in the face. Well, actually, that's not the case. I'm going to sand it all over with 180 grit. And then I'm going to damp it. And when I say damp it, I mean I'm going to damp it. I'm going to get it wet. So once that's had a chance to dry, back to the sanding table and 180 grit all over again. And now for the finish. I got 2 stages to my finish. The first one being pure mineral oil. Now I know there's been some talk lately on influencer channels, if I can use that horrible word, about whether mineral oil, pure mineral oil, is still the right finish for chopping boards, cutting boards and the such like. Well, I see no reason to change. It served me and my boards extremely well for the past 6 or 7 years, and I'm yet to have a complaint about it, so I'm going to continue. These large boards won't fit in my little oil bath bucket, so I just take a jar of it and pour over it and make sure every single square inch is completely covered and has had a good dosing. It'll probably be in here for 5 minutes, I suppose. just make sure it's had plenty to drink. So I left the board overnight to dry, and now I'm going to put my second stage, final stage of finish on, which is a beeswax and mineral oil solution. Now I make this up myself. I use approximately 30% beeswax to mineral oil, but I'm not particular about it. 30, 35, 40, around that, never less than 30. And I just warm up the mineral oil in a saucepan, making sure to use my own saucepan and not one from inside that's going to get me in trouble. And then drop the beeswax in and keep warming it until the beeswax completely liquefies and gets totally suspended in the mineral oil solution. And the beeswax, I think, is critical because not only does it seal the pores of the board, it also helps stop the board lose moisture and gain moisture, importantly, when it's dumped in the kitchen sink for a wash, but also stops any food debris getting in the pores. As this is the largest board we make, the premier product on the website at the moment, I like to put a brass name plaque on it as opposed to engraving with the laser. I think it just adds that bit of professionalism, makes it look that little bit more reassuringly expensive, dare I say. And there you have it, my first ever cherry cutting board. I really hope my customers like it, because I think that is stunningly beautiful. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time. Ta-ra.